My topic this week is existing documents, records, and artifacts. Looking at our textbook from Mills as well as from Mertler that we had to read for our chapter 5, we could determine that this would be a qualitative form of collecting data. This one is more of a catch all sort of representation. It covers so many different things and so many different ways of being able to collect information. And in my next slide, I have more overview of what those things could actually include. But it's more of unlimited sort of ways for you to be able to collect information. One thing that is different about this type of collecting data is that usually the data that you're collecting really isn't for an action research study, but we're able to use it in the study based on previous information that was collected. So usually you would find this through some type of records or looking at previous information from the students or the school, and that you're able to use it in the study to answer specific questions that have to do with exactly what is going on. So you would also be able to use this information to help initiate student interviews. And then one thing that you need to make sure that you're following are the district approved procedures for making sure that if you're securing access to these documents that you're doing it in the correct way, especially because sometimes you're talking about looking in CUME folders as well as looking at uh, different information that specifically is for certain students that might be considered to be confidential. So the questions that these types of data answer usually first is supposed to be just being able to gather historical insights. That could be for students, that could be for the school, but it's also helpful to identify potential trends that you might see. It also could help you in your research to be able to figure out how the potential trends might actually work within the school or as well as the student in itself, and then just explain how things got the way that they were. So, and that could be based upon any of these different ways. For example, dropout rates, maybe attendance records, and anything like that. So, basically, existing documents and records artifacts can cover so many different things. You have your archival documents or records that include your attendance, your retention, rates, your discipline referrals, your dropout rates, suspension rates. It even includes the attendance rates at parent teacher conferences, which could refer back to the question of how things got the way that they were, possibly, or just historical information and insights into certain things. Disaggregated data by grade level, basically, that means grades from math, reading, writing, etc. But for each individual grade level, you have your standardized test scores, you have your student participation rates. That includes an extracurricular activities because that also can affect sometimes how students perform. You have your cumulative folders, and then you also have, which should not be forgotten, is classroom artifacts. That could be your performance based assessment or just your students' responses in general to questions that you're asking. And it could be informal, doesn't have to be a formal way to ask, but also student portfolios where they're able to collect their own uh, progress within whatever they are doing within the classroom. We also have our curriculum materials, our textbooks, our instructional manipulatives that we might use, newspaper stories that are being covered about school events, minutes from faculty or school board meetings. And as I said, this is basically like a catch all term because it covers so many different things that just aren't mentioned in other sections. So basically, anything that we are not going to be talking about specifically that is taken in the qualitative will basically be put into the existing documents and records artifacts. Again, you will be taking this information from previous data that was already collected. It just might not have been necessarily collected for the study, but you're able to use it for the study. So, certain strengths and weaknesses, and I kind of put these two things together because although there are weaknesses within this collecting of data, they did discuss ways that you could make it a strength or how you can make it easier. So one of the things was organization because there's so many different things that you might be looking at from previous data that it can create a situation where you just have papers everywhere and it's so hard to be able to keep everything together. So one way that they said that you could make this maybe into a strength would be that you're looking for a common data form where you're putting in all the information into one single form, and then that way you're able to find it easily, but you're also able to look at it easily and reference it as you may need. The other thing that was noted as a weakness was the time that it takes to go through everything and be able to find all the different existing documents that you might be interested in. But a way that maybe you would want to think about making it easier is utilizing people that could essentially help, like for example clerical assistants, school aides, student teachers, whatever it may be, where they're able to collect that data because it doesn't really involve you specifically doing something within the classroom. It's you just looking at previous information and they're just able to find it for you and be able to compile it in the way that it might need to be. One thing just in general about qualitative data is that it's going to go more in depth. So, qualitative data goes more in depth when it comes to looking at a lot of the questions as to why things are happening. And that could just be an overall strength in what you're looking for. So, certain concerns that might end up being an issue when you're looking at these types of information being used within the study is whether it's actually accurate. And that is could be due to a lot of different factors. Uh, because it's not really coming directly from you, but also there are a lot of different possible um, variables that you're not able to look into and be able to understand. And that could end up being a situation where your data might not line up with what you're seeing or maybe what you may see within the classroom. So that could be a concern is, for example, if you're thinking about a student looking at their performance over the last year or the year prior, and you're seeing that they're not as good in a certain subject, but you're seeing that they perform better in than what they were performing. There might have been some existing variables that were not considered as to why they did worse the year prior in comparison to what they're doing now. And that means that you'll have to definitely use different forms of being able to collect information and not just using one. Definitely, when it comes to this, you'll have to use the triangulation of using multiple methods in order for you to be able to come up with a more well rounded information. And also, another thing that you could consider is maybe member checking, where you're able to talk not just with students, but maybe colleagues to check it for accuracy and maybe have those conversations as to whether it actually is depicting exactly what they were seeing within the classroom. And that could, for example, could be the fact that some students just really aren't good test takers and they might look on paper that they're not very good at not understanding what the subject is. But when you go to the colleague or you go to the student, they will say, I'm not a good test taker. I'm not, that's not one of my strong suits. But they're able to show it within the classroom. That might be a way for you to be able to kind of just make sure that the information that you're being given is actually accurate.